Stop for a moment. Before you blame yourself for his sudden silence, before you replay every word you said trying to find the mistake, listen carefully. Something ancient just happened. His shadow woke up. You think you did something wrong because yesterday he was warm, gentle, alive. He laughed with you, told you you were different, made plans for next week. And now, he's distant, quiet, cold. He stares through you as if the connection never existed. You feel sick, confused, hollow. You keep asking yourself, what changed? This is the moment most women break their own hearts by trying to earn back a warmth that was never theirs to control. Here's what you need to know. When a man truly begins to love, something inside him stirs that he has avoided his whole life. His shadow, the part of him filled with fear, shame, and memory, rises to the surface. The same tenderness that opens his heart also threatens his control. He sees in you what he lost in himself, and it terrifies him. At first, he feels alive in your presence. You awaken his softness, his boyish joy, his hunger for truth. But then, almost overnight, the mirror you hold up begins to burn. He sees his own weakness reflected in your eyes. He feels the pull of his wounds, the memories of the times he was small, powerless, rejected. The warmth turns to ice, not because he stopped caring, but because caring forced him to feel. He withdraws. He protects himself the only way he knows how, by turning off his emotions. And you, left in the silence, think you broke something. You didn't. You only touched the part of him he's been running from. If you chase him now, if you beg for answers, you will fall into his shadow with him. You'll start apologizing for emotions that were never yours to heal. You'll confuse his fear for rejection and his numbness for indifference. You'll forget that his battle began long before you. And this is the nightmare. Weeks pass, months pass, maybe years. You meet men who look different, talk softer, promise more. Yet somehow, you end up in the same story, giving, hoping, wondering why the warmth always fades. The pattern repeats because you keep thinking his change means you failed. It doesn't. It means his shadow woke up and he couldn't face it. But here's the hope, the dream outcome that begins the moment you understand this. Imagine yourself months from now. You've stopped trying to fix men. You've learned to see the signs, the hesitation in his eyes, when intimacy grows too deep, the way he jokes to deflect truth, the sudden distance after a tender moment. You recognize it and smile sadly, knowing his shadow is stirring. You don't chase. You stay grounded. You keep your warmth, but you don't pour it where it can't be received. Your friends will notice first. Over dinner, they'll say, "You're different. You're calm." They'll remember the nights you cried over unanswered texts, the days you couldn't eat because you were waiting for closure. Now you sip your wine, listening, smiling softly. You don't rush to defend him or explain him. You simply say, "He wasn't ready." And your friends will look at you with awe. They'll see that you've stopped confusing a man's silence with your worth. Your family will feel it too. Your mother will look at you and see peace she never found. She'll notice that you no longer call home sobbing, that your voice sounds sure. Your father, if he is there, will sense a woman who no longer looks for safety in broken men. The house feels lighter when you visit, because you're no longer carrying everyone's pain. Even the men who once turned cold will feel the difference. They'll sense the door has closed. They'll test it, of course, sending messages late at night, trying to see if your warmth still belongs to them. But they'll find the fire gone. You'll answer with quiet clarity, "I see you, but I'm done living in your winter." They'll feel it, not anger, not bitterness, just a truth that frees you both. And then something new happens. You meet a man who has faced himself. His eyes do not flinch when he feels love rise inside him. He does not run from tenderness. He speaks slowly, as if words matter again. His presence is calm. He doesn't promise, he shows. You realize that this is what it looks like when a man's shadow no longer rules him. Your friends will notice the difference. "He's solid," they'll say. Your mother will smile with relief. The world around you will shift because you finally did. You no longer attract men who hide from themselves. You attract those who are awake. And if you could see your future self, you would cry not from sadness, but from peace. She wakes in the morning beside a man who is steady, She drinks her coffee slowly. She no longer waits for love to prove itself. It simply stays. She looks back at you, the woman still searching, and whispers, "Thank you for learning when to stop chasing cold hearts." This is what happens when you understand the shadow. You stop trying to fix men, and you start choosing consciousness. You stop fearing the cold, because you know it's not about you. Listen carefully. Love is what triggers it. But you can decide whether you will become its target or its mirror. When you understand this, you will never again lose yourself in someone else's storm. Think of the time you have already lost months of anxiety, replaying every moment, trying to decode silence. Imagine those hours returning to you as peace. Imagine walking through your days without that ache, without that question, what did I do wrong? The truth is simple. You did nothing wrong. You just met a man at the edge of his own awakening. You touched the place he fears most, and he ran not from you, but from himself. That's not rejection, it's revelation. You saw his shadow before he did. Now, don't let the lesson turn you bitter. Let it make you wise. When the next man grows distant, pause. Watch without panic. Don't chase, don't explain. Just know, something inside him is trembling awake. If he faces it, he'll return with more depth. If he doesn't, he'll vanish, and that's your protection, not your loss. You are not here to mother men out of their darkness. You are here to recognize it, to stand in your own light, and to decide who is ready to meet you there. That is how love stops being pain. So when a kind man turns cold overnight, remember this: his shadow just woke up. It is not your fault. It is not your lesson to carry. It is only your signal to step back, stay grounded, and let what is unconscious rise without taking you with it. Because one day soon, you will meet the man whose shadow no longer needs to run. And when you do, his warmth will stay. Not because you begged for it, because it will finally match your own. Stop for a moment. Before you blame yourself for his sudden silence, before you replay every word you said trying to find the mistake, listen carefully. Something ancient just happened. His shadow woke up. You think you did something wrong because yesterday he was warm, gentle, alive. He laughed with you, told you were different, made plans for next week. And now, he's distant, quiet, cold. He stares through you as if the connection never existed. You feel sick, confused, hollow. You keep asking yourself what changed. This is the moment most women break their own hearts by trying to earn back a warmth that was never theirs to control. Here's what you need to know. When a man truly begins to love, something inside him stirs that he has avoided his whole life. His shadow, the part of him filled with fear, shame, and memory, rises to the surface. The same tenderness that opens his heart also threatens his control. He sees in you what he lost in himself, and it terrifies him. At first, he feels alive in your presence. You awaken his softness, his boyish joy, his hunger for truth. But then, almost overnight, the mirror you hold up begins to burn. He sees his own weakness reflected in your eyes. He feels the pull of his wounds, the memories of the times he was small, powerless, rejected. The warmth turns to ice, not because he stopped caring, but because caring forced him to feel. He withdraws. He protects himself the only way he knows how, by turning off his emotions. And you, left in the silence, think you broke something. You didn't. You only touched the part of him he's been running from. If you chase him now, if you beg for answers, you will fall into his shadow with him. You'll start apologizing for emotions that were never yours to heal. You'll confuse his fear for rejection and his numbness for indifference. You'll forget that his battle began long before you. And this is the nightmare. Weeks pass, months pass, maybe years. You meet men who look different, talk softer, promise more. Yet somehow, you end up in the same story, giving, hoping, wondering why the warmth always fades. The pattern repeats because you keep thinking his change means you failed. It doesn't. It means his shadow woke up and he couldn't face it. But here's the hope, the dream outcome that begins the moment you understand this. Imagine yourself months from now. You've stopped trying to fix men. You've learned to see the signs, the hesitation in his eyes when intimacy grows too deep, the way he jokes to deflect truth, The sudden distance after a tender moment, you recognize it and smile sadly, knowing his shadow is stirring. You don't chase, you stay grounded. You keep your warmth, but you don't pour it where it can't be received. Your friends will notice first. Over dinner they'll say, "You're different, you're calm." They'll remember the nights you cried over unanswered texts, the days you couldn't eat because you were waiting for closure. Now you sip your wine, listening, smiling softly. You don't rush to defend him or explain him. You simply say, "He wasn't ready." And your friends will look at you with awe. They'll see that you've stopped confusing a man's silence with your worth. Your family will feel it too. Your mother will look at you and see peace she never found. She'll notice that you no longer call home sobbing, that your voice sounds sure. Your father, if he is there, will sense a woman who no longer looks for safety in broken men. The house feels lighter when you visit because you're no longer carrying everyone's pain. Even the men who once turned cold will feel the difference. They'll sense the door has closed. They'll test it, of course sending messages late at night, trying to see if your warmth still belongs to them. But they'll find the fire gone. You'll answer with quiet clarity, "I see you, but I'm done living in your winter." They'll feel it. Not anger, not bitterness, just a truth that frees you both. And then, something new happens. You meet a man who has faced himself. His eyes do not flinch when he feels love rise inside him. He does not run from tenderness. He speaks slowly, as if words matter again. His presence is calm. He doesn't promise, he shows. You realize that this is what it looks like when a man's shadow no longer rules him. Your friends will notice the difference. "He's solid," they'll say. Your mother will smile with relief. The world around you will shift because you finally did. You no longer attract men who hide from themselves. You attract those who are awake. And if you could see your future self, you would cry not from sadness but from peace. She wakes in the morning beside a man who is steady. She drinks her coffee slowly. She no longer waits for love to prove itself. It simply stays. She looks back at you, the woman still searching, and whispers, "Thank you for learning when to stop chasing cold hearts." This is what happens when you understand the shadow. You stop trying to fix men, and you start choosing consciousness. You stop fearing the cold because you know it's not about you. Listen carefully. You cannot stop his shadow from waking. Love is what triggers it. But you can decide whether you will become its target or its mirror. When you understand this, you will never again lose yourself in someone else's storm. Think of the time you have already lost months of anxiety, replaying every moment, trying to decode silence. Imagine those hours returning to you as peace. Imagine walking through your days without that ache, without that question, "What did I do wrong?" The truth is simple. You did nothing wrong. You just met a man at the edge of his own awakening. You touched the place he fears most. And he ran not from you, but from himself. That's not rejection, it's revelation. You saw his shadow before he did. Now, don't let the lesson turn you bitter. Let it make you wise. When the next man grows distant, pause. Watch without panic. Don't chase, don't explain. Just know, something inside him is trembling awake. If he faces it, he'll return with more depth. If he doesn't, he'll vanish, and that's your protection, not your loss. You are not here to mother men out of their darkness. You are here to recognize it, to stand in your own light, and to decide who is ready to meet you there. That is how love stops being pain. So when a kind man turns cold overnight, remember this: his shadow just woke up. It is not your fault. It is not your lesson to carry. It is only your signal to step back, stay grounded, and let what is unconscious rise without taking you with it. Because one day soon, you will meet the man whose shadow no longer needs to run. And when you do, his warmth will stay. Not because you begged for it, because it will finally match your own. When love first touches the heart of man, something ancient stirs. It is as though the light of a forgotten sun breaks through the crust of his reason, awakening the figures that have long slept in his depths. Tenderness opens the gate through which the denied parts of his being rise, demanding recognition. What was buried in centuries of discipline, shame, and silence now breathes again. No man welcomes this resurrection. He has built his life upon the illusion of mastery, believing that to control is to be safe, to command his feelings is to be strong. Yet love is not a servant. It breaks through the walls of habit and lays bare the soul's disorder. In the eyes of the beloved, he glimpses not comfort, but truth, the reflection of his unlived self, the one he exiled in the name of becoming a man. When I say that his shadow awakens, I mean that all which the conscious personality has refused to acknowledge begins to move with its own dark will. The smile that once concealed his uncertainty falters. The gestures that once charmed become heavy, uncertain. He no longer knows who he is, for love has made him transparent to himself. The warmth that united him with the beloved turns cold, not out of malice, but out of fear of dissolution. In her presence, he feels the childhood of his soul, its dependency, its longing, its hunger for motherly assurance. And because he confuses woman with mother, tenderness becomes peril. He feels again the pain of being small, the shame of needing love. Thus he withdraws, believing he must protect his strength, when in truth he is fleeing from his own vulnerability. The woman, unaware of this subterranean drama, feels abandoned. She searches for error in her words, in her gestures, in her love itself, yet nothing in her conduct explains the change. The truth is more mysterious. She has touched the threshold of his unconscious. Through her, the forgotten child within him cried out. Through her, the rejected emotions sought return. He mistakes this awakening for danger, as though the one who loves him were an enemy. When I observed such transformations, I learned that love is not merely affection, it is an initiation. Every true encounter with the other forces us to meet the stranger within ourselves. The man who cannot bear this reflection freezes, for to feel deeply is to be undone. He hides behind silence, as if by extinguishing warmth he could extinguish the vision that haunts him. In alchemical language, this is the beginning of the nigredo, the blackening of the soul. The old forms decay, the metals melt, the familiar self dissolves. What appears as coldness is, in reality, the heat of transformation working invisibly beneath the surface. The beloved becomes the vessel of this process, the one who inadvertently awakens the sleeping God within him. I have often said that no transformation occurs without suffering. The shadow does not rise as an enemy, but as a messenger of wholeness, yet the ego experiences it as death. It fears being swallowed by what it cannot control. The man therefore retreats, but his withdrawal is not the end, it is the threshold. He stands before his own darkness, trembling like an initiate before the temple gate. If he could remain still, if he could endure the confusion without turning away, he would discover that the darkness conceals light, that the very shadow he fears contains the lost warmth he seeks. But most men flee before this revelation, and their flight leaves the woman bewildered, thinking herself unworthy. She does not see that she has awakened a mystery greater than herself. Thus, when a kind man turns cold, something sacred is happening. The old equilibrium is breaking. The unconscious, long silent, has begun to speak. To love him in that moment is to stand before the furnace where the soul is forged. The wise woman does not chase the too wanting Delis, fleeing man, for she knows the alchemy must complete itself in darkness. Love is not destroyed by such silence, it is transfigured. It sinks beneath the surface like a sun at dusk, promising a new dawn to those who wait without despair. The shadow's awakening marks not the end of affection, but the beginning of transformation. Only through this descent into night can man remember the forgotten half of his being, and only through such remembrance does love become real. The shadow is the invisible twin of consciousness, the brother whom the ego has denied. I have spent much of my life observing how man builds his daylight personality upon the repression of half his nature. What he calls his virtue often stands upon the grave of disowned impulses, his composure upon buried rage, his gentleness upon unacknowledged cruelty, his strength upon forgotten tears. The shadow is not evil in itself. It is the sum of all that the ego refuses to accept. It contains inferiorities, instincts, memories and possibilities too heavy for the narrow daylight of self-image. It lives like an ancient animal beneath the house of reason, waiting for the moment when love or crisis breaks the floorboards. Then it rises, bewildered by light, and the man feels possessed by moods he does not understand. When I say that a man turns cold overnight, I mean that his conscious virtues have met their opposites. The one who prided himself on calmness now trembles. The one who believed himself gentle feels anger without cause. The one who longed for love fears it as sickness. The ego clings to the ideal of itself, yet the psyche demands balance. Thus, the shadow appears, forcing him to see what he has exiled. Civilization has taught men to amputate their inner life for the sake of adaptation. The boy learns to suppress his tears. The youth hides his longing beneath ambition. The adult disowns his vulnerability as weakness. But the soul is not deceived. What is repressed does not die. It gathers weight in the unconscious, shaping dreams, fears, and sudden aversions. It is this burden that love awakens. The beloved touches the secret fault line between his constructed self and his true nature. She evokes his unwept grief, his forgotten tenderness, his hunger for approval. These feelings rush upward, threatening to shatter the carefully built image he shows to the world. In panic, he withdraws. His chill is the frost that forms when hot tears are held back. Many believe the shadow to be merely dark, yet within its obscurity dwell creative forces. Every artist, lover, and seeker has descended into it. It contains not only rage and shame, but also instinct, imagination, and the seed of authenticity. The problem is not the shadow's existence, but man's refusal to enter it consciously. Unseen, it governs him. Seen, it becomes his teacher. In analysis, I have observed that when a man acknowledges his shadow, he does not become worse, he becomes whole. The energy once spent on repression returns as vitality. The fear of the unconscious subsides, for one cannot fear what one has befriended. But the first encounter is painful, for it strips him of pride. He must admit that beneath his cultivated manner lives something primitive and true. In dreams, the shadow often appears as a brother, a rival, or a stranger who disturbs the peace. Sometimes it takes the form of a neglected child or a dangerous animal. These figures are not to be destroyed but understood. They demand the recognition that the ego has denied. They are the bridge between the man he pretends to be and the man he is destined to become. The coldness that women feel from men is the frost of repression. Behind it burns the heat of fear. He is not rejecting her. He is defending his fragile order from the flood of his own emotion. The more tender the connection, the more violent the inner revolt. To hold him in that moment would be to hold one who is drowning in his own depths. Therefore I say, do not confuse distance with indifference. The shadow is his initiation, not his betrayal. He retreats because he cannot yet bear the gaze that sees him whole. In time, if he endures his solitude, he may return with eyes that no longer flinch before the truth. But until that day, love must respect the mystery that lives between two souls, the night through which every man must pass before he is reborn into light. In every man lives a hidden image of woman, an inner figure that I have named the anima. She is not merely a memory of the mother or the sum of feminine impressions. She is the personification of the soul itself, the living bridge between consciousness and the unconscious. Through her, man's inner world speaks, dreams, and feels. When he meets a woman in the outer world, this image awakens, and the boundary between his inner and outer realities trembles. The man believes he has fallen in love with her, yet what he truly encounters is his own soul mirrored in her being. The beloved seems radiant, mysterious, almost divine. She embodies what he has long sought without knowing: tenderness, intuition, and meaning. In her gaze, he feels the forgotten beauty of life. But this enchantment carries danger, for the anima projects herself onto the woman, covering her with the colors of his inner world. At first, this projection is bliss. The man feels complete, as if a lost part of himself has been restored. His heart, long silent, begins to sing. Yet what he sees is not her true nature, but the reflection of his own depths. The moment she acts differently from his inner image, the dream falters. Confusion enters. What he adored as divine now appears fallible, human, and ordinary. The illusion collapses, and with it, his certainty. It is here that many men turn cold. They cannot bear the disillusionment that follows the loss of projection. The warmth that once flowed so freely becomes suspicion and withdrawal. The beloved, bewildered, feels punished for being real, but she has committed no sin, she has merely ceased to embody his fantasy. He feels betrayed because the divine image has withdrawn back into the depths of his own psyche. The anima, when she retreats, leaves a void. Man feels hollow, forsaken by meaning itself. He tries to revive the lost enchantment, or he searches for another woman upon whom the image might descend again. Yet the pattern repeats, for what he seeks outside belongs within. The soul demands recognition, not substitution. Each failed romance is a summons to turn inward, to meet the anima where she truly dwells, in the darkness of his own heart. When the man resists this call, the anima becomes restless and capricious. She troubles his dreams with images of impossible love, of water and moonlight, of feminine figures both alluring and cruel. He grows moody, irritable, or cold. But when he listens, when he treats these visions not as torments, but as messengers, she transforms. She reveals herself not as enchantress, but as guide, the voice of the inner life calling him toward wholeness. I have observed in analysis that when a man begins to converse with his inner woman, he becomes capable of genuine tenderness. His love ceases to depend upon illusion. He no longer needs the outer woman to mirror his soul, for he has found it within himself. Then love becomes possible as encounter, not projection as communion, not possession. But few reach this maturity without pain. The shattering of the projection feels like death, because the anima carries the meaning of life itself. The loss of her idealized image plunges the man into despair. Yet this is the necessary descent, the psychological night in which he must separate his soul from the person who awakened it. Only then can he love her not as symbol but as being. The woman who understands this will not fight to restore the vanished warmth. She will know that she was never the cause of it, only the vessel through which his soul announced itself. If she waits without bitterness, she may one day meet him anew, no longer blinded by projection, but illumined by understanding. And if he has faced his depths, he will see her not as goddess or shadow, but as companion of the journey toward the self. Thus, the awakening of the anima is both a miracle and a trial. It begins as rapture and ends as revelation. Love is not the fusion of two halves, but the recognition of two souls who have each made peace with their own inner other. Only such a meeting endures, for it unites not illusion, but consciousness. When the man's warmth vanishes, it is the woman who feels the wound first. Her heart, accustomed to the rhythm of shared breath, suddenly beats against silence. She searches her memory for an error, something said too softly, too soon, or too much. Yet love's disappearance is seldom caused by words. It is the symptom of an inner movement that belongs to the man's soul, not hers. Still she bleeds, for his withdrawal touches her own ancient story. From childhood she has been taught that her value lies in being needed. She learns to keep peace, to heal, to soften anger. When the man turns cold, this instinct awakens with terrible force. She feels summoned to restore the broken connection, to soothe the unseen pain. She calls, writes, explains, forgives, believing that love can be mended by effort. But the more she reaches toward him, the further he retreats, for her devotion touches the very wound he cannot face. In that moment, she is no longer addressing the man before her, but the child within him, the boy who could not bear to be seen in weakness. Her tenderness evokes his buried fear of dependence. Thus her care becomes threat, her presence unbearable. The more she offers warmth, the more he flees. She mistakes his fear for rejection and begins to question her own worth. The cycle repeats. Her gift becomes her torment. This is the woman's initiation. She stands before the abyss of her own shadow, the compulsion to earn love by suffering. She feels the echo of the mother who gave too much, of generations of women who measured virtue by endurance. Her pain is not only hers, it belongs to the collective soul of womanhood, burdened with the task of redeeming man's unacknowledged darkness. Yet the unconscious asks something different of her, not sacrifice, but awakening. To awaken is to see the pattern without becoming it. She must recognize that her impulse to heal is also her defense against solitude, for as long as she chases the fleeing man, she avoids the silence where her own soul waits. The moment she turns inward, the scene changes. His coldness becomes mirror, showing her the places where she too has abandoned herself for love. Thus the wound begins to speak. If she listens, she will hear a deeper voice. Do not mother him. Do not beg the dream to return. The psyche demands that she hold her own fire without pouring it into another's darkness. This is the moment of transformation, the birth of inner sovereignty. When she ceases to plead, the energy of love, once bound to his absence, flows back into her life. She discovers that her tenderness need not perish when it is not received. It can become wisdom. The woman who endures this awakening changes in the quietest of ways. She no longer confuses rescue with love or silence with punishment. She begins to see that compassion without boundary is not virtue but self-betrayal. She learns to distinguish between empathy and surrender. Her heart remains open, yet her center is no longer hostage to another's turmoil. I have seen such women in analysis. They arrive broken by disappointment and depart luminous with understanding. They have faced the archetype of the wounded healer within themselves. By refusing to collapse into bitterness, they transmute pain into vision. They become, in the alchemical sense, the vessel that holds the report. Opposites, love and clarity, feeling and discernment. When the woman reaches this state, her presence changes the field around her. The men she meets feel the quiet authority of one who cannot be deceived by appearances. She no longer pleads for warmth, she radiates it. Her compassion becomes choice, not compulsion. In this way, the feminine principle rises from servitude to consciousness. Thus her wound, far from being a mark of defeat, becomes her initiation into the sacred knowledge of relationship. She learns that love which endures does not beg or cling, it stands in its own light, and when she meets a man again, she will not seek to save him from his shadow, she will invite him to meet her in his. This is the beginning of true partnership, born not of need but of awareness. When love withdraws, the heart enters a silence that seems unbearable. Yet in the language of the psyche, this silence is not absence but transformation. The man who retreats into himself is like the alchemist sealing his vessel. The elements within begin to ferment, dissolve, and unite in new combinations. What appears from outside as cold indifference is, inwardly, a process of fire. The unconscious does not change through words but through symbols, and withdrawal is one such symbol. The man, driven by confusion and fear, believes he is escaping. In truth, he has entered his own laboratory, the place where opposites contend. The ego resists, the shadow presses forward. Memories rise like vapors, forgotten emotions condense into tears. His silence is the sound of his inner metals melting. Every transformation begins with decomposition. The old self must decay before the new can form. I have seen this blackening, this nigredo in many souls. It comes with despair, guilt, the sense that all meaning is lost. The man who once found delight in love now feels hollow, as if the world has betrayed him. Yet what dies here is not love but illusion, the fantasy of control, the mask of self-sufficiency. If he could understand the nature of this death, he would not run from it. The alchemists called it the mystical putrefaction, a necessary corruption through which the seed germinates. In this darkness, his inner opposites, the masculine and feminine, the conscious and the unconscious, are being mingled. The soul seeks reunion with its forgotten half. His withdrawal is the womb in which this hidden union is conceived. But rarely does a man recognize the sacredness of his isolation. He imagines that he has failed, that the fire within him has gone out. In truth, it burns unseen. His task is to endure without interference, to let the process complete itself. Any attempt to force clarity before its time would shatter the vessel. The woman's pursuit, however loving, risks disturbing this fragile work. For her, too, the separation is alchemical. She must resist the impulse to open the sealed vessel, to rescue him from his own initiation. Love that interferes with transformation becomes possession. The wise woman learns to step back, trusting that the opus of the soul must unfold in darkness. In doing so, she guards the sacred boundary that allows each person to become whole. In the alchemical texts, after the blackening comes the albedo, the whitening. It signifies purification, the dawning of consciousness after chaos. The man who endures his solitude begins to glimpse the outline of his soul. He dreams of clear water, of dawn after storm. Slowly, his defenses soften. He begins to feel again, not as before, but with a new humility born from suffering. When warmth returns, it is no longer the naive heat of projection, but a steady flame kindled by self-knowledge. The man discovers that tenderness need not destroy his strength, that feeling does not annihilate him. In reconciling with his shadow, he learns the secret the alchemists called the rubedo, the reddening, the union of opposites, the birth of the living gold. The woman who has kept her vigil through this process senses the change without words. His eyes, once guarded, now rest upon her with calm awareness. The love that emerges is quiet, without drama, for it no longer hides a wound. Both have been tempered by the fire of solitude. The alchemy has achieved its aim, two souls purified of illusion, capable at last of meeting as equals. Thus, the withdrawal that once seemed death reveals itself as renewal. What fell apart was never the bond itself, but the falsehoods that obscured it. The man's silence, the woman's patience, the shared darkness, all were ingredients in the same mysterious work. Out of separation, union is born, out of loss, a deeper love. Such is the secret of the soul's alchemy. Nothing truly perishes, it only changes form. Beneath the man's sudden withdrawal lies an ancient inheritance. Fear is not merely a personal emotion, it is an archetypal current running through the soul of man. In it live the ghosts of centuries, the echo of patriarchs and warriors who learned to survive by denying their tears. The coldness you feel in him is the frost of a collective winter, the long discipline of men who equated feeling with defeat. From early childhood, he was trained to mistrust tenderness. Each time he reached for comfort, some unseen voice commanded, "Endure." He learned that to be dependent was to be small, to be soft was to invite ridicule. Thus his heart hardened around an invisible shame. When love now touches that place, the memory of humiliation rises, ancient, wordless, stronger than his reason. What you call silence is the armor forged by that history. The boy within him once adored his mother, the first image of warmth and safety. But when separation came, as it must, his love was met with loss. The pain of that fracture was never fully felt. It was sealed away, becoming the seed of his fear. Later, each intimacy rekindles the same anxiety. That closeness will demand surrender, that tenderness will lead once more to abandonment. So he hides behind distance, believing coldness to be power. Power, in this sense, is his substitute for connection. The more fragile his inner world, the more fiercely he clings to mastery. When he begins to love, he senses his fortress crumbling. His emotions threaten to reveal how helpless he truly feels. In the presence of the woman, he perceives not safety but exposure. Every word of affection seems to undress the carefully armored ego, and so he retreats, preserving dignity at the cost of love. This pattern is not new. In every era, the masculine principle has feared its own depth. The hero ventures outward to conquer kingdoms, yet trembles before the inward journey. To face the unconscious, the dark mother of all life feels to him like regression, as if to sink into chaos. But until he dares to descend, he remains divided, outwardly strong, inwardly lost. His coldness is the symptom of this uninitiated hero, forever fleeing the feminine within. In analysis, I have watched such men confront their fear as one faces a serpent in a dream. At first they recoil, calling it evil. But when they look closer, they see that the serpent guards treasure, the memory of their own soul. What they fear is not woman nor even love, but the return of the feeling self they buried in youth. To embrace that serpent is to reclaim life, yet few have the courage, for it means surrendering the illusion of control. Shame, too, stands as a gatekeeper. When a man begins to feel deeply, he senses the ridicule of the inner father, the stern voice that equates emotion with failure. This inner critic, born of collective ideals, whispers that tenderness is weakness and that dependence is sin. The man believes he must choose between strength and love, unaware that the highest strength lies in vulnerability. Until this delusion dies, his shadow will rule him. What then is required? He must remember, not intellectually, but in feeling. He must allow the boy within him to weep the tears he once forbade. Only then does the armor melt, and the adult heart learn to breathe. The woman who witnesses this process must understand that his fear is not directed against her. She has merely awakened it. If she can refrain from turning his defense into her wound, she will have already broken the pattern. When fear is faced, it loses its tyranny. The man discovers that he does not die from tenderness, rather, he comes alive through it. He sees that power divorced from feeling is sterility, and that shame is but the shadow of unlived humanity. The memory of pain transforms into compassion. The same force that once divided him now becomes the bond that unites him to life. Thus fear, when illumined, reveals its secret nature. It was never the enemy, but the threshold. And so, when a kind man turns cold, know that it is the trembling of an ancient archetype. He is reenacting the history of his fathers, the drama of separation and shame. His chill is not the end, but the beginning of remembrance. Whether he faces it or flees will determine not only his fate, but the evolution of the masculine soul itself. For the one who confronts his fear becomes not less a man, but more a human being. Every true relationship is an encounter between two unfolding souls. It is not designed for comfort, but for consciousness. When I speak of individuation, I mean the process through which each person becomes who they truly are, not the mask they wear, nor the image they defend, but the whole pattern of the self as it seeks realization in time. Relationship is the crucible in which this becoming is tested and refined. At first, man and woman meet through projection. Each sees in the other what the soul has lost. For him, tenderness and meaning; for her, strength and protection. Their love begins as recognition, yet it is recognition through illusion. The beloved seems to complete what is missing, but in truth, love stirs what was always there, waiting to be owned. When projection fails, as it must, each stands before their own unfinished self. This collapse of enchantment is painful because it tears away the fantasy of union. Yet only then does real intimacy become possible. The woman who no longer expects the man to heal her discovers the strength of her own inner masculine, the logos that gives her discernment. The man who no longer seeks to possess the woman meets his anima as inner reality, the eros that grants him feeling. Thus, the opposites begin to balance within. Individuation is not separation from others, but the discovery of genuine relatedness. The man who has faced his shadow no longer clings to woman as redeemer, nor fears her as destroyer. He meets her as an equal participant in the drama of life. Likewise, the woman who has met her own depths no longer becomes prisoner to his moods. Their dialogue ceases to be a struggle for possession and becomes an exchange of meaning between two aware souls. In such union, conflict does not vanish, it transforms. Friction between opposites becomes creative tension, the energy that sustains growth. Every disagreement reveals new aspects of the self-seeking expression. Love becomes not a static state, but a living process, the rhythm by which two inner worlds influence and transform each other. To remain conscious within that rhythm is the highest human art. Yet few are prepared for this sacred labor. Most would rather remain in projection's dream, where the other carries their unlived qualities. But this illusion always ends in bitterness. The one who refuses the task of individuation turns love into repetition. He meets the same pattern in new faces until life compels recognition. It is only through awareness that destiny becomes choice rather than compulsion. In the analytic work, I have seen relationships end outwardly but continue inwardly in dreams and reflections. The outer bond may dissolve, yet its psychic function remains. It reveals what the soul must integrate. The woman realizes that the warmth she sought in him was her own capacity for love. The man learns that the understanding he demanded from her is the wisdom of his inner feminine. Thus, love becomes a mirror, guiding each back to themselves. When this realization dawns, the need to possess fades. One no longer clings to the beloved for survival, but cherishes them for being. Love then resembles the alchemical conjunction, the coniunctio oppositorum, where opposites unite without destroying their difference. Each remains distinct yet deeply interwoven, as day and night depend upon one another to complete the circle of life. Such relationship is no longer built on longing, but on reverence. Each partner becomes a witness to the other's individuation. They understand that to love truly is to allow the other's destiny to unfold, even when it leads away. Their connection ceases to be a chain and becomes a current, an invisible stream through which both are carried toward greater wholeness. Therefore, When love seems to falter, let one not despair. The psyche uses relationship as its instrument of awakening. What appears as loss may be the self at work, dissolving illusion so that truth can emerge. Every encounter, however brief, is a fragment of this greater process. To love consciously is to recognize that the soul's aim is not possession but transformation, not fusion but the birth of two awakened beings who, having faced their own darkness, can now walk together in the light of awareness. At last, the time comes when man can no longer flee his own depths. After years of struggle, avoidance, and repetition, he stands face to face with the figure he has feared, his shadow. The encounter is not grand but quiet, often arising in solitude when the noise of distraction subsides. He feels the old restlessness return, but now he does not escape. He looks inward and recognizes the stranger as himself. This moment, humble, wordless, is the true beginning of healing. The shadow that once terrified him now reveals its human face. It is no longer a monster but a wounded brother, the sum of all that he rejected in order to appear strong. He sees the child who wept unseen, the lover who felt unworthy, the man who hid his tenderness behind reason. Every image he disowned now returns, asking not for approval but for understanding. To accept these fragments is to retrieve the pieces of his soul. In this reconciliation, the heart undergoes a subtle reversal. The man discovers that evil, as he once imagined it, is often only unlived life energies that became destructive because they were denied expression. Anger transforms into courage, envy into aspiration, sensuality into creativity. What was dark gains light, not through denial but through recognition. The shadow, integrated, becomes the source of authenticity. This is why I have said that the individual does not become good by imagining light, but by making the darkness conscious. The ego cannot abolish its opposite. It can only learn to coexist with it. True morality arises not from repression but from awareness. The man who knows his own darkness is less likely to project it onto others. He no longer needs to create enemies to carry what he refuses to see. His relationships become clearer, freer, more human. When the woman who once suffered from his coldness meets him now, she may feel the difference immediately. His eyes, once distant, hold steadiness. He no longer demands that she heal him, nor fears her as mirror of his wounds. In facing his own soul, he has learned to face hers. His tenderness is no longer weakness. It is strength that has passed through fire. He can love without fleeing, because he no longer mistakes love for exposure. The reconciliation with the shadow also restores his relation to the divine. For what is God, if not the totality of light and dark, creation and destruction? When man denies his shadow, he also denies half of God's image within him. To integrate the shadow is therefore a religious act. It expands his sense of the sacred to include imperfection, suffering, and contradiction. The world regains its mystery, and his soul regains humility. Dreams at this stage often show images of union, the marriage of sun and moon, the embrace of opposites, the emergence of gold from base metal. These symbols portray the self, the center and totality of the psyche, reconciling the fragments of the personality into one living whole. What once divided him into pride and shame, love and fear, begins to harmonize into a single current of life. I have seen men who, after such an inner turning, walk differently. Their movements lose tension. Their voices carry quiet authority. They no longer seek approval because they have found meaning in their own depths. Their presence brings peace, not because they have conquered themselves, but because they have ceased to wage war within. The energy once wasted in defense now nourishes creation, work, and love. The shadow, when befriended, becomes guide. It warns when pride swells, comforts when despair descends. It reminds the soul that perfection is not the aim, wholeness is. To live with the shadow is to accept the paradox of being human, that one can love and still err, aspire and still fall, shine and still carry darkness. This acceptance is the ground of compassion, both for oneself and for others. Thus the man who once turned cold awakens into warmth of another kind, a warmth born not of need, but of integration. The woman who once grieved his retreat may now meet him anew, not as savior and sufferer, but as two beings who have each passed through their own night. Between them flows a stillness that requires no explanation. Love has descended from the heights of passion to the depth of soul, where it no longer burns but illumines. When the shadow has been seen and welcomed, the warmth that once vanished returns, but not as before. It no longer flares suddenly like a flame seized by wind. It burns quietly, sustained by knowledge. This warmth does not come from desire, nor from the hunger to possess. It arises from the center of being, where opposites have found peace. The man who once turned cold now radiates calm heat, for he no longer fears his own heart. Love at this stage has lost its fever. It has passed through death and been reborn as presence. The man no longer clings to the woman for salvation. He meets her as one meets sunrise, with reverence and understanding. He does not flee tenderness, because tenderness no longer threatens to dissolve him. He can stand within feeling and remain whole. Such stillness is not indifference. It is mastery of the self that has ceased to divide. The woman, too, feels this change. In his nearness, she senses neither tension nor pretense. His gaze no longer searches her for proof of his worth. It simply beholds. He does not need to be adored, nor does he fear being seen. The love that flows between them has the texture of simplicity, the kind that requires no vows, no argument, no rescue. Two human beings, having faced their shadows, now stand unmasked before each other, and the air itself feels pure. This is the conjunctio, the sacred union that the alchemists sought in their long nights of experiment. It is not the merging of two into one, but the meeting of two who are whole. The sun and moon do not annihilate each other. They form the rhythm by which life is sustained. So too do man and woman, reconciled within themselves, create a harmony that endures beyond passion. Each becomes mirror and witness to the other's soul, each the vessel in which the other's light is reflected. Such love does not erase individuality, it deepens it. In this stage, both learn that devotion is not the sacrifice of self, but its flowering. They remain distinct, yet transparent to one another. The currents of the inner and outer worlds now flow together, and what was once battle becomes dialogue. They may still quarrel, for opposites will always meet in tension, but their quarrels no longer destroy. They reveal. Conflict becomes conversation. Silence becomes communion. From this maturity springs a different kind of joy, one free of intoxication, steady as the pulse of the earth. This joy does not depend on constant closeness or reassurance, for both know that love is not sustained by proximity but by truth. When apart, they feel not fear but continuity. The bond lives quietly, even in absence, because it is rooted in the self rather than in circumstance. To reach this point is rare, for it requires the death of many illusions. The ego must relinquish its dream of perfect fusion and accept the truth that every love story is also a path of self-discovery. Yet when this truth is lived, love ceases to be torment and becomes revelation. One no longer seeks in another what must be found within. One gives, not to be needed, but because the heart has overflowed. The man who has faced his own darkness no longer projects it upon the woman. He no longer divides her into angel and witch, saint and sinner. He can behold her humanity without confusion, for he has made peace with his own. In turn, the woman no longer reads his silence as rejection, nor his solitude as neglect. She knows the rhythm of the masculine soul and trusts the ebb and flow of its tides. Their love breathes, and in that breath there is freedom. This freedom does not abolish devotion, it purifies it. The man still protects, but now without dominance. The woman still nurtures, but now without self-erasure. Their giving arises not from need, but from abundance. They do not rescue each other, they remind each other. The power struggle that once governed their union is replaced by mutual recognition, two flames distinct, yet feeding the same fire. When such love enters the world, it radiates beyond the pair who live it. Children born of this atmosphere grow without the inheritance of fear. Friends drawn near feel steadier, for warmth of this kind is contagious. It calls the buried life in others to awaken. Love that has passed through shadow becomes archetypal. It speaks for the whole of humanity. Through two conscious souls, life itself remembers its purpose: to reconcile, to integrate, to make opposites dance. From such union arises a warmth that endures all seasons. It is the warmth of consciousness itself, the fire that does not consume but illuminates. It is the hearth around which the psyche gathers its reconciled parts. The world, once fractured into opposites, now reveals its secret unity. Life and death, joy and sorrow, man and woman, each necessary to the other's completion. Love becomes the language through which the self celebrates its wholeness, and so the story closes where it began, with warmth. But this warmth is no longer borrowed from another. It is self-generated, rooted in the depths of being. When a kind man turns cold and later returns with quiet eyes, he has not merely changed his mood, he has passed through initiation. He has met his own soul and found peace. His warmth stays because it now flows from the source that cannot be taken away. To the woman who has endured the silence and learned to stand in her own light, this new warmth feels like recognition rather than rescue. She knows that she no longer waits for love to prove itself. She is the proof. Together, they embody what love was meant to reveal all along, that only by descending into darkness can human beings find the fire that never dies, the steady flame of consciousness, born from the reconciliation of shadow and light. The alchemists called the final stage rubedo, the reddening, when the work is complete and the inner gold revealed. So too in love, after the long night of the soul, comes the dawn that never fades. The man and the woman, now, tempered by experience, walk the same earth, yet live in another world. One illuminated not by passion's blaze, but by the tranquil light of understanding. Their love no longer seeks eternity, it has become eternity's expression.